All right, brilliant. Um, like I said, John 17. We'll get there. We'll get there a little bit from now. You know, when you sit down for a moment and consider really throughout history in different industries or maybe different sports, if you think about kind of a small group of united men or united women that achieved an incredible feat. What are some of those teams and groups that come to mind? All right, now I'm not asking, that's rhetorical, but just to put that in your mind. I think one of those for me, I don't know who's watched this before. This will definitely give away my age, but it ended up being a little bit of a cult movie. It was the movie called Cool Runnings about this Jamaican bobsled team. All right, it is one of my all-time favorite movies. If you've not seen it, watch it. Now, the classic thing about it is there's no snow in Jamaica. Laura and myself actually went there for honeymoon. It's like completely tropical. Guys did not even know that bobsledding really existed, and yet there was these three sprinters that couldn't get into the Jamaican team that somehow saw an ad to join this team, and three of them kind of joined it. But watch it. You can Google the story. It's really inspiring. And then they competed in the Olympics. They actually crashed, but subsequently they competed in the years rolling by. So, a small group of people that achieved an amazing feat that didn't seem possible. The other one, and I think this one caught my attention, I actually shared the story with some of the leaders earlier this year, is a story of a small group that went on an incredible adventure led by a guy called Ernest Shackleton. I don't know who has heard of him. But Shackleton wanted to cross the Antarctic. He wanted to go from one side of the Antarctic to the other side, about 2,700 kilometers. And what that would entail is that you would start that journey just sort of to the south of South America. You would cross the Antarctic, the South Pole, and you would end up just south of New Zealand. Okay. So it was crazy. No one has ever done it before. And in order to find a group that would join them, they ran a newspaper ad. Okay. And the newspaper ad read, "Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success." Okay. So this is the ad that ran. And on December 5th, 1914, so quite a while ago, Shackleton set out with 27 men on this adventure. Now, the story just gets ridiculously crazy. Crazy thing is they never reached the South Pole. Shortly into starting this journey, they ran into kilometers and kilometers of pack ice, and soon their boat was trapped on the ice, and they drifted along with the ice for 10 months, all right, until the pressure got so much that the boat was literally crushed. And the 28 of them, Shackleton and the 27, had to get out. They took their three little rescue boats, which was 1914. These are like little small whaling boats. And they pulled this across the ice until they realized that it's really damaging the rescue boat. So they set up camp on this ice for a little while, and then realized that if they didn't do something, they weren't going to make it. So they started this hazardous journey to look for a little island where they could find a little whaling community. So they all got into three of the boats and they landed at this little island called Elephant Island. Now, the problem was this place completely uninhabitable. All right, there's no one else there. And again, as they arrive on this little island, Shackleton realizes that a couple of weeks in, realizes that if he doesn't leave to go and find help, they're not going to make it. So he decides to leave everybody behind and to get into a small boat with 5 other men, right, and to set off on 1,300-kilometer journey rowing in this little boat, all right, to find an island that again has a little whaling community. So after a long time, they actually arrived at this island called South Georgia. The problem is they arrived at the wrong side of the island. So they landed at the island, they hauled up the boat, and now they had to traverse through ice and mountains across this island to get to the community that would actually be able to help them. All right, him and these 5 guys, while the other ones are waiting on Elephant Island. Now, what makes the story even more remarkable, and he finally did get help, is throughout the ordeal, no one died. All right, so we're talking about 1914. We're talking about over a span of longer than a year in like minus degrees, running out of food, all of this going on. There was no stories of people eating one another as you would expect sometimes, as would happen on the movies. There's no mutiny. There's no like uproar. This group stayed completely united, all right, and was able to sort of complete this incredible adventure and journey. And since then, there's been a number of historians, leadership consultants, trainers that have studied this case study to find out what on earth, like what enabled them to do this. And there's a number of things that came out that I won't dive into deep. But it really is a remarkable tale of a small group that was together, that was united, that stayed motivated in the midst of uncertainty. They never knew whether they were going to get back or not, and somehow made it through this incredibly tough situation. You know, a couple of weeks ago, we looked at a story in the Gospel of Mark, and we spoke about that we are all in the same boat. I don't know if you can remember that, if you're there. We often face the same struggle. But the great thing is we serve the same God. We serve the God that can command the wind and the waves to subside, that even in the midst of similar storms that we all face, we can trust and hang on to the God that we serve together. All right. So we started this little series called Same. And often, I appreciate what Tando said, how often she's kind of used that word when you're going through something similar. You don't have to use a long sentence. You just say, yep, same. And really what it communicates is we're in this together. We're going through this together. All right. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about being and building authentic community. How do we do this together in a way that I think, like Shackleton's men, we can get to the other side and tell the tale. We can get to the other side of this adventure and have our faith intact. Okay. Now, I want to start here, and I want you just to take 10 seconds to think to yourself the answer to this question, and then we'll dive into John 17. You know, what was or is the biblical vision that's held out for us as an authentic spiritual community? Like if you were to think about what was the picture that was painted throughout the Bible about what this authentic spiritual community should look like, what would the answer to that be? All right. Now, the passage that we're about to jump in and that we're going to consider here describes a time when Jesus is about to leave his disciples. Okay. Now, up until that point, he's called them to follow him. He's cared for them. He's nurtured them. He's trained them. He's protected them. And now he goes into a prayer time anticipating his departure. He's about to leave. Now, we know how the story unfolds. We have to remember that not everybody knew how the story unfolds, but we know this is the evening before the cross that he's going to get crucified. We know that he got resurrected. We know that he would appear to this band of disciples again, not for long, and then he will be removed from them physically for good. All right. So we are at Jesus' last night, and he jumps into a prayer time, and we're just going to pick up here, praying very specifically for, I can't say the 12, his little small group. It's actually the 11, because Judas by that time has already left. Who'd like to read there for us John 17, just verse 11? And for time's sake, we're going to pick a little one so that we can move on here. Who'd like to read that for us?
Yeah, I can
Zander,
go for it, man. So John 17:11.
Yeah.
I will no longer remain in the world. I will remain in the world no longer, but they are still in the world, and I am coming to you. Holy Father, protect them by the power of your name, the name you gave me, so that they may be one as we are one.
Okay. All right, so this is kind of part of it where, Jesus praying to the Father for this group of 11, his kind of close crew. And he's like, Father, I'm about to depart. I'm about to come back to you. I'm about to leave the world, but they are remaining, behind in the world. Please protect them. Please shelter them. By the power of your name, the name that you've given me. And then he says, so that they may be one as we are one. Right. And then he shifts gears in his prayer, where he also starts praying for us, the disciples that would come after that time, the disciples that would come as a result of these apostles, this little band, this little group, as they are going about living out the kingdom life, as they are going about making disciples of all nations. We are obviously a result of that. And Jesus prayed for us as well. So let's pick it up there. Who wants to read for us verse 20 down to 22?
I can read.
Go for it. Is that Mark?
Yes, sir.
Go for it, man.
My prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one. Father, just as you are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. Down to 22. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one.
And 20 and 23. Sorry, man.
I in them and you in me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me.
Okay. All right. So this is crazy. Like, we just read back into a prayer that Jesus prayed for us tonight. Like, I don't know. Does that still stand? Or not? I don't know. But this is Jesus, like, he's about to depart. Like, he's about to go to the cross. And then he won't have a lot of time with his band anymore. And like, he breaks out in prayer. And what is the vision? What is the prayer? What is his hope? What is his dream for this community that would stay behind? Well, pretty much what it is that they may be one. And then he adds this radical thing, Father, as we are one, may they be brought to complete unity with one another. That when the world looks at them, at this otherworldly type of unity that they experience, that it would be clear that you have sent me and that there's something distinct and unique in this group. That was his prayer. That was his hope. And Jesus knew full well that this group on that day that was around him would grow to be one, would grow to become one comprising of all nations, all tribes, all ethnicities, all languages, and made up of many generations. And this was the plan and the vision all along. This was the garden project that started in Genesis chapter 3. This was the promise to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12 in the whole Old Testament. And that they would somehow experience, as this spiritual family, as this community, this oneness in the midst of that diversity. Even though they will be radically diverse, that they will be brought to complete unity, because that will be a demonstration of God's love, of God's power, and that will be a result of the gospel message. Okay, now if you flip forward to Acts chapter 4, you don't have to turn there. You can if you want. Acts chapter 4, verse 32. We see a snapshot picture of really Jesus' prayer coming true. We see a snapshot picture of this community after he departed and what it was like. And it simply says this, as Luke writes his historical account about the early church. It says, all the believers, Acts 4:32, all the believers were one in heart and mind. All right. Now, obviously, you guys know he's not talking about the actual physical organ, all right? But he's talking about, it's this incredible picture of unity. Like he's referring to like the inner core, like who they are. They were one in heart and mind. And then as you read further on, even the next part of that sentence in the next verses, you see how this translates into practical living of caring for one another, of pulling together because they are one in heart and mind. So what is the grand vision? Well, the grand vision is that all nations, all tribes, all languages, all social economic classes, all personality types will live under God's rule and his reign, pursuing doing his will as one, complete unity. Okay, that's Jesus' prayer for the campus ministry. That's Jesus' prayer for your small group. Okay, that's his hope. And if we look back at history, it was not only his prayer, we see this literally play out in the community that followed in the book of Acts. Now, I think, I don't know, I'm going to assume this, but I think I might get close to being right. I think we often want to experience this type of unity. Okay, if you're kind of serious about Jesus and you're serious about following him and you're serious about church, as in not church being the building, but church being the people in the community, we want to experience this type of unity. We want to experience it in our small groups. We want to experience it in the campus ministry as a whole. Like we as leaders desire for people to experience this as they get into contact with the group. But I think we don't necessarily want to pay the price or do what it will take to experience that. Often we want it, we hope for it, but what's involved, we're like, yeah, I don't know. All right, and we're gonna talk a bit about that. What would you say? This is not rhetorical. All right, what enables Christian unity? What enables, do you think, what enables this type of unity? Complete unity in the midst of the diversity that we have. What do you think that makes that possible?
I can answer. I think essentially the verse that says speak the truth in love kind of encapsulates it for me. So both the truth in terms of like honesty, vulnerability, being open, being truthful about the good, the bad, and the ugly, but truly loving one another within that as well. Okay.
Awesome. That's great. And the verse Abby quoted, I think it's Ephesians 4, 23, 25. Actually, the next part of that verse says, so that everybody can grow up and mature as the body of Christ. So that's a vital part of achieving that vision. All right. What else? What enables this type of unity? Oh, Zander, go for it. Sorry, man. You could just unmute and go for it.
Yeah, so I think Daniel 3, when we read about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that is, they chose to stand against problems, against what the society deemed as the normal, and they stood together. I think as soon as we choose to be on the same mission and choose to live a life that's not normal to everybody else, that kind of unifies us already, because we're all in the same struggle, we're all in the same fight, and knowing that we have people around us who are fighting the same fight already unifies us. So I think, yeah, that's it.
Amen. That's awesome. Great. All right. Anybody else want to give a stab at that one?
Yeah, I can go, because coming off of what Zander just said, I think like Christian unity actually kind of cost you something, and I don't think it's bad that sometimes stuff costs you something, but I think Christian unity, I think it requires like a lot of sacrifice. I think you alluded to it, like people want unity, but they don't want what it takes. And so I think like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and all the stories, even Jesus died, and that's actually what brings us together. And so I think that's what it costs. I think it costs sometimes a part of you, sometimes it costs your comforts, sometimes it costs like your personality type. It's not like you don't lose yourself, but I think you have to put yourself second to actually be united properly.
Brother, I'm so glad this is being recorded, man. That was awesome. Thanks, Light. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the price tag's high. It's laying down your life. Definitely, I might get to that, but laying down what you deem to be comfortable or what you deem to be convenient and all of those things. Yeah, I'll just throw out a couple of things, and this is actually not what I want to focus on, but I think what enables Christian unity is shared identity. Again, if we take seriously the idea that we are sons and daughters of God, or that we're part of his family, or that we are a disciple or follower of Jesus, that's identity. Like if somebody would ask me to complete I am statements, what are your first three that comes up? Okay, that's your identity. That's how you identify yourself. But man, if you share that with people, all of a sudden deeper unity is possible. That's one. I think another one is a shared goal. That's very important. The idea that, man, if my goal is to do God's will on earth as it is done in heaven, if my goal is to be fully transformed into the likeness of Jesus, that I want to be constantly transformed to become mature, complete, not lacking anything. If my goal is that, then that enables unity. And then I think a shared mission as well, to be an image bearer, to be a disciple maker. Like if we have that in common, those things, shared identity, shared goal, shared mission, I think it enables unity to happen. Without that, and without that, I don't know. I think and there's a lot of groups in the world that's trying to be united. A soccer team can do that. A rugby team can do that. A whatever can have a certain sense of unity. But if we're talking about Christian unity, if we're talking about complete unity, there's definitely a deep spirituality component that needs to be there, that needs to be shared in that group. Now, believe it or not, that's not what I want to speak about. So what I actually want to talk about, and we're gonna shift gears here and open it up for a bit of a discussion as we go through this. I want to drill down into some big things that breaks or fractures our unity. What are the big threats? What are the things that if we don't keep this in check, we will either remain or become a group of separate individuals that sort of like one another, but we're not really fulfilling that grand vision and that picture that Jesus prayed for. Now, who of you has driven down the road, and as you drive down the road, you see kind of a broken down car on the side of the road. And then what happens is you see kind of the bonnet being open, and you see a couple of people's heads in the engine. When you drive past and they're sort of stuck down, and you know what they're doing, right? Everybody knows what they're doing. So they're trying to find the fault. They're trying to find what's the problem. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to lift the bonnet, believe it or not, on Jesus's 12. We're gonna open it up a little bit and go to some passages where we're going to look at some of the dynamics that were at play in Jesus' small group that literally had the potential to fracture their unity. Okay, now that's a bold statement. Even Jesus' small group ran the risk and was in danger. Okay, so have a look in Mark chapter 9. Let's lift the hood, the bonnet here together. Mark chapter 9. All right, who would like to read there for us? Verse 30, down to 35.
I can read.
Go for it. Thanks, Isha.
Let's do this. Let me just scroll down. They left that place and passed through Galilee. Jesus did not want anyone to know where they were, because he was teaching his disciples. He said to them, "The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise." But they did not understand what he meant and were afraid to ask him about it. They went to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the road?" But they kept quiet because, sitting down, Jesus called to the 12 and said, "Anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all."
Okay. All right, just to there. All right, so what strikes you about the disciples here? what do you notice as we start kind of peeking into the engine room here? You just unmute and share. That's fine.
I think one thing I noticed is they kept quiet.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes it's definitely good to sit and think through things. But I think they had an opportunity to just ask outright. Instead, they kind of sat with it and maybe thought a bit. Yeah.
Okay.
All
right.
Can you ask your question again?
Yeah, just what strikes you about the disciples here? You would make some observations, yeah.
The argument they had, like arguing about who is the greatest while like they're with Jesus, I feel like massive egos. I think you talking about like what disbands unity, that's probably like the chief one. Like people all thinking they're better than the person next to them. I don't think that goes well for a group trying to be together.
Yes. All right. Awesome. Great. Anybody want to add to that? Yeah, Divan?
So I think looking at the question you asked earlier, or said driving down the road, the bonnet with the smoke, everyone just looking at it. And if I have that picture in mind, it's like the disciples are walking down and they're arguing. It's the people standing at the car, they're just looking at the smoke, and the one says, no, it has to be the oil. The other one says, no, the water is too low. And they all think they have an idea and arguing about it, but none of them have a solution or trying to fix it. None of them come with an idea to fix it. And I think that's a mentality that they had to say like, oh, this is what's going to happen. I'm the best. But none of them tried to do the work that was essentially asked of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever, what's going on here, I don't know if you've ever had like a nonsense conversation. I know none of you guys have. You're always talking about deep spiritual, intellectual stuff. But you have a nonsense conversation and either your parents overhear it or a teacher. And they sort of say, hey, what were you talking about? Okay. And you know that the best course of action is just to keep quiet, because what you were talking about was not upbuilding or right or righteous in any way. So you just keep quiet and you have that kind of deer caught in the headlight smile. You're like, oh no. That's what's happening here. I mean, these guys are literally walking along the road, arguing about who is the greatest. Like, who's the awesomest? Like, who's the most important? Okay. And Jesus obviously knew this. And when he came inside, he's like, what were you guys talking about? And all of a sudden, man, they were very quiet. No one spoke up. Have a look in Mark chapter 10. All right, let's pick up here, verse 32. Who wants to read 32 down to 34?
I can read that.
Go for it, Abby.
They were on their way up to Jerusalem with Jesus leading the way, and the disciples were astonished, while those who followed were afraid. Again, he took the disciples aside and told them what was going to happen to him. We are going up to Jerusalem, he said, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles who will mock him. Am I at the right place?
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
Will mock him and spit on him, flog him and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise.
Okay. All right. Now, this kind of sets the scene. So what's happening here is it says, interestingly, Jesus was leading the way. The disciples were astonished and those who followed were afraid. Now, that doesn't make any sense unless you start in verse 33. What happens in verse 33 is Jesus drops a very clear bombshell about what's about to happen. And he says to them, we are going up to Jerusalem. And by the way, here's what's going to take place there. The Son of Man, me, will be delivered over to the chief priests, to the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death, and they will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him, spit on him, flog him, kill him. 3 days later, he will rise. Now imagine if you're part of that small group. You are on the road to Jerusalem, and Jesus drops this bombshell, and there ain't no smile. He's not being sarcastic, okay? I would say Jesus leading the way. As a disciple, I'd be astonished. Why on earth are we going to Jerusalem? And the oaks behind me are afraid, because they know when the leader gets struck down, this is kind of in antiquity what tends to happen. When the leader gets taken down, it's not only the leader, it's his band of followers as well. So they're trying to figure out, yeah, I'm not so sure. Why are we going to Jerusalem? This does not sound good. Okay, now let me ask you this. How do you think Jesus might have felt, and again, we are projecting back into it, knowing that this is what lies ahead for him? That he's about to enter Jerusalem, never come out again, and the cross is ahead. What do you think would be running from a humanistic point of view through his mind and his heart? And what would you say are his needs from his band of followers and his small group at this time?
I think knowing that Jesus was both fully God and fully human, I think there has to be fear of some sort. Just fear in the sense of pain. Pain's not nice. And so I think he knew that was coming, and that's overwhelming. And so I think what he needed was support. Like, imagine I'm telling someone, oh, I'm going in for an operation, and they're like, oh, yikes, that scares me. And then that's it. And so it's like, I think Jesus needed support from the group, and love from them, instead of fear from them. Because I think he has enough, I think he was scared to a certain extent.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, anybody else?
Sorry, does someone want to go?
Go for it.
Can I go? Okay, shoot. I think, like, I know myself, back in primary school, before any like athletics race, I would get like these butterflies in my stomach, and I'd feel anxious about, this race ahead of me. And so if I felt, anxiety towards something like that, I can only imagine, I can't put myself in Jesus' shoes, but I can only imagine what he must have been feeling, walking up to the place where he knows that he's not coming out of. And I think then you hear that the disciples were astonished. I think astonished, they're like shocked. They're thinking this guy's crazy. I think he's already might be like, Jesus, is there a way out? And we hear this in his prayer as well. And you would want his disciples to almost be a comfort, a support structure, like Abby was saying. But I don't know. I feel like for them, they're almost giving him more of a reason to doubt by the astonishment that they have in him following God's plan. So yeah, I think that's probably some of the things.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, I think all of us would agree. I mean, if you were in Jesus' shoes with kind of your flesh, there's fear, there's anxiety, there's I'd walk very slowly. Like, I would take the long road. I'd have a lot of pit stops because, if I stay out of Jerusalem, maybe this thing won't happen. I could delay. Like, we'd have all of that going on. All right. So that's what's going on. Let's see this little small group of Jesus with him going through this, and these were his needs. Verse 35. Then James and John, okay, now these guys are super close to Jesus. The sons of Zebedee came to him. Teacher, they asked, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. Okay, how does that hit you, considering this moment? Okay. Yeah, it's sort of like, can you imagine that? Like, if your small group came to you, say, well, I appreciate you talking about all of that stuff, but we want you to do for me whatever I ask you. I've got favors coming your way. Like, wow, I'm probably going to get a call saying, is there any way that I could join another small group, or like what's going on here? Now let's see what the request is. Maybe it's spiritual, maybe it's something great. Verse 36, what do you want me to do for you? Goodness, Jesus gracious, you asked. They replied, let one of us sit at your right and the other one at the left in your glory. You don't know what you're asking, Jesus said. Can you drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with? We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, well, you will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with, but to sit at my right or my left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared. When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. Okay. So what do you notice specifically about James and John here? Okay, if we lifting the hood here, on the 12, looking at what is that small group like? What's being exposed here? What do you notice? What's coming to light about what's going on here?
I think there was just one. I don't know if they even listened to what Jesus just said, because if they did, I'm like, why would you ask this now? So it's like, are you actually listening? And then with that, it's like just an utter lack of compassion. Like literally, oh yeah, cool, okay, great. Now back to me. And yeah, so that's interesting. But yeah.
Yeah, Xander.
Yeah, Abby continues to beat me to speaking first. So, no, I think from the outer point of view, it sounds amazing. Like, geez, I want to sit next to Jesus one day in heaven. Like, that's where I want to be. But if you look from a prideful perspective, they want to be in God's glory. They want, when angels or whatever look at Jesus, they want to be seen next to him. It's not about Jesus at all. It's all about themselves and how people look at them. So, and Jesus is very humble in the way that he responds. Is like, I'm not the one that gives these positions. They have already been prepared for long ago. So yeah. Jesus is so humble in even the way that he answers, like, he is the Son of God, but he doesn't think that he doesn't have the authority to say who gets to sit next to him. And these guys feel entitled to being next to Jesus, which is the complete opposite.
Yes. Yeah. That's awesome. Anybody else? That's great. Thanks, Xander. I see Tando said there's a lot of pride. Well, weird to say, but they're very human, and receiving the gift without paying the price, utter selfishness. Yeah, that's right, Tando. All right. Sorry, I just interrupted somebody. Go for it.
I think that one of the things that I picked up about them is, like, as much as, like Abby was saying, they hear Jesus speaking about this whole ordeal that he's going to go through, but then they're like, okay, but when will we get to, like, sit next to you, like, be there? And because they are his closest friends, so obviously they're like, okay, if Jesus is going to get this, then I'm going to also enjoy this, and it's going to be my vibe. And it's just funny because Jesus had mentioned in Mark 9, I think it was Mark 9:35, that if anyone desires to be first, he must be last of all and servant to all. And so James and John wanted to be served. They wanted to be at the top. And also they were pulling away from the oneness from the rest of the 10. It became about the two of them and Jesus, but not the rest of them. They didn't ask, okay, all 12 of us going to be around you in heaven, but it was about them. It wasn't about Jesus at all.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's a great observation, Kia. Yeah. Elena, last one. Yeah.
I think they weren't aware of his needs, because sometimes if somebody's going through something, I can say, like, I can make a joke to make it lighthearted.
Yeah.
So I don't know if maybe that was their intention, because again, it doesn't make sense why they would do that. But maybe they were like, oh, sorry. Well, guess what? Will we even be sitting next to you in the kingdom of heaven? Like, as a joke. But instead of asking Jesus, actually, what did you mean by that? And are you okay? And do you need us to laugh with you or cry with you? Or they didn't ask him what he needed.
Yeah.
So I think maybe they could have just assumed.
Yeah. No, it's spot on. Excellent observation. And also you realize, I mean, he even pushes back, saying, well, can you drink the cup? Can you be baptized with the baptist? They're like, yep, we can. I'm sure they had no clue what he's talking about. But there's just such a deep self-focus on what's going on. Now, what's interesting in verse 41, and I think Kia alluded to it, you see the other ones. What's interesting here is the two of them come up asking for Jesus right and left. What does that mean for the other 10? The other 10's getting the lesser seats. When these guys hear about it, like, this group is on the verge of, like, splitting. The visions is developing. Now, I don't know why they asked or why they assumed that they could get those seats. But those guys were indignant. So what's going on here? Well, one, it's a total misunderstanding of how this community is supposed to function, how the spiritual family is supposed to function, the relationships, the power structures, that and they grasped that eventually after the cross, but at this point in time, they didn't get it. And what's going on and coming out of like the engine of that car is selfish ambition with a veneer of discipleship. These guys were vying for positions, for status, for esteems, completely focused on themselves. They could not even hear what Jesus was saying. They could not even listen to what his needs might have been at that time. You know, we are called to do the will of Jesus to the benefit of others. Okay, we're not doing it for others or because of others, but absolutely the way of I should be following Jesus and doing God's will in such a way where it would actually benefit those around me, where I'm actually considerate of those around me. I get blessed to be a blessing. That's Abraham, right? But I think the reality is we can often be living for ourselves at the expense of others, where it's about me, what works for me, what I feel, what I can get, how this can benefit about me. And people are going through a whole lot of stuff right around us. There's needs, you know, there's things going on, but we're so wrapped up that we cannot hear, we cannot see, and we cannot meet the need. Can you imagine for a moment, and I'm going to split you guys out into random small groups just now. Can you imagine if this self-centeredness went unchecked in the apostles' small group? What impact that would have had on history? Can I say that I believe that God would have found another way to get the human project to continue and to get the family to move, but I don't think we'd have the book of Acts. Right? You know, the book of Acts is called the Acts of the Apostles. If this thing went unchecked, this selfish ambition, this self-centeredness, and Jesus did not address it and attack it, they did not repent of it, this thing would have fractured their unity. And that thing that Jesus would have prayed for could never have come true. Now, again, I'm saying God's far bigger than that. He could have picked other people. It could have worked out, but you can see the potential damage that this would have had. All right, here's what I want you to do just for 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back and close out. Is I want you to discuss I'm just going to break people out randomly, is what are practical things that we do, okay, and let's get honest. Let's not talk about kind of out there, that we do that breaks unity, that fractures unity. Okay, what are some things now, if you feel like, man, I battle with that, then change the question. What do you think are some things that we could do that will break unity and fracture unity? Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so very practical things. So think about a small group setting, think about the campus ministry, think about a Friday night event that we just had. What are some things that happened or that could happen that would fracture or break the unity of the group? All right, either things that I would do or maybe things that I would not do. Okay, that things maybe that I should do. All right, so let me stop there.